the quickest way to increase your salary is by moving companies and getting a new job, essentially. Because companies will pay more to bring new individuals inside of the organization from outside.
Hello everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Mr MoneyJar show. We are joined today by career expert and founder of the Fairy Job Mother, Shoshanna Davis. Welcome, Shoshanna.
Hi Timmy, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. You feeling good today?
Yes, I'm feeling very good.
I'm really excited for this episode because I think that we're going to get into a lot of stuff that definitely would have benefited me when I was first looking for a job when I was a student and stuff. And I just wish I had someone like you online to kind of teach me stuff. So hopefully we can help out some people. But before we get into all of that, please tell us a bit about yourself and why you started your platform.
Yes, absolutely. So as Timmy said, my name is Shoshanna and I started my platform, Fairy Job Mother, which is essentially a one-stop shop for all things careers and confidence at work for young people, but then also for employers to help them address skill gaps and help them set their young employees up for the world of success. So I work with both individuals as well as employers and other organizations. And why did I start my platform? Really good question. So I'm guessing probably similar to you, Timmy. I started it in lockdown. 2020. So it's been about 3 years now. And it was an idea that I'd had for a long time, as I kind of always struggled with like the career advice and guidance available at school and at university. And I always really felt like it was just kind of a generic one-size-fitted-all approach who came from individuals who either had never been in industry, or if they had been in industry, it was like 20 plus years ago. And I actually was not academic at school, so I failed my A-levels. I didn't get into any of my university choices. I basically had to beg my university to let me in. So I joined university with the mindset of, like, I'm at a disadvantage. I don't have the grades. I need to get like as much experience as I could, essentially. And that was my goal for university. So my career services weren't that helpful. So I ended up just figuring it out along the way. So it's an idea that I'd always had. However, at the time, I was working for like a big company. I was traveling the world globally. And then obviously COVID happened and I had all of this extra time. So I just thought, let me start something, which initially was just sharing career advice and content online, and is now my full-time job and my business.
Yeah, and I got to say, I love your branding. I love your website. I think it's all really clean, really fresh. And as I said, very much needed, particularly in this post-COVID world where like you got working from home, you got hybrid working, that sort of thing. I think the idea of the working day has changed a lot. You mentioned there something I didn't know about you, which is that you failed your A-levels. What was that like? That must have been quite tough at the time.
I think at the time it was tough, but it was like, you know, the kick up the arse I needed to like do something with my life, as I was very bored at school. I really enjoyed it just for the social aspect. I like making friends. I like, talking to boys, but I wasn't actually interested in getting any work done. And obviously then I didn't get into any of my university choices, and I kind of was like, oh shit, I need to do something with my life. My parents, really are not proud of me. And so I just figured I needed to make a change and change that, essentially.
Okay, so how did you make that change?
Well, I first obviously started taking things seriously. So I didn't get into any of my university choices. However, I knew that I wanted to do marketing. And at the time, marketing wasn't really an industry that you could join from like an entry level perspective. So obviously now there's like apprenticeships and stuff. There wasn't really that. So I knew I needed to go to university. So I actually ended up phoning a couple universities and like basically begging them to let me in. One of them ended up taking a chance on me and let me in. And I kind of just said to myself in my head, like, once you're in, you need to take this seriously. And ultimately, when I started, I was doing a subject that I wanted to do. Whereas at school, you learn a whole bunch of subjects that you're, not interested in or won't use. So it was kind of the motivation from that side as well.
So if we could go on to job hunting tips.
Yes.
because it's like, even if you know what you want to do, there's so many different platforms that you can use to look for jobs. You got to write a CV, you got to write a cover letter, or do you? You've got the application form. Sometimes you've got admissions tests and stuff. So if you start from the very beginning, how does someone go about looking for a job? Like, do you have any favorite platforms that people can use to go about job hunting?
Yeah, I think before I go into platforms, I think it's really good to start your job search with a goal in mind. As a lot of people I speak to, obviously they're looking for a job and they're kind of just like, I don't care, I'll do anything, which obviously is really good because you're obviously very open-minded. However, from an employer's perspective, they want somebody that's sure, right? They don't want somebody that will take absolutely anything. So I think definitely taking some steps to figure out what you want to do, or at least figure out roles that interest you. As, I'm guessing majority of the people that are listening to this podcast, you're still relatively young. So it's not like you have to pick a career and stick to it forever, as a lot of the time it can feel like that. You just have to find something that interests you right now that you're willing to try out. And obviously then in 6 months or 12 months time, if you don't like it, you can always change. So I think definitely at least have a goal in mind. Platform wise, good question. I think my favorite platform is LinkedIn.
Interesting.
For a couple reasons. Obviously, LinkedIn has like a jobs board, a jobs feature, which is great. And there are so many different filters you can do. You can filter by location, you can filter by company. But then also just aside from that, I really like LinkedIn because I can't think of any other platform where you can find like absolutely anyone at any single company in the world and just reach out to them. So like some of my favorite features are every organization on LinkedIn, they'll have like a company page. So obviously you head to the search bar, you can type in the company, click on that, it loads the company page. And then if you scroll down, there's a section called, I think it's called people or employees. And you click on that and it will have a search bar. And in that you can basically type in any job title that you want, and you can filter it by location. So if, for example, you want to get into marketing and you're looking for an entry-level marketing role, well, you can type in marketing manager and it's going to come up with a list of everyone at that company that works in that role. And you can obviously then connect with those individuals, you can reach out to them, or you can even connect with other people at that company that are in the job roles that you want to be in. So I could talk about LinkedIn for days, and I know you have other questions, but LinkedIn is definitely my favorite.
Okay, cool. Are there any that you just wouldn't bother with?
Controversial. I don't like the job sites like Indeed and Reed. I just feel like they're just like, I don't know, they're full of crap. And for these job sites, it's very much a numbers game. So these jobs get, thousands of applications. And also a lot of the time, these platforms, they only allow you to like upload one copy of your CV. So it doesn't really allow you to tailor your application at all. You're just sharing like a blanket CV with all these companies. And yeah, just me personally, I've not had much luck with it, and neither have my clients. So yeah, I don't really like those type of platforms.
We're going to come on to CVs in a second because I've got some CV questions for you as well. But the interesting thing about LinkedIn, which I found out relatively recently, is that I think LinkedIn's got 930 million users in total, 300 million monthly active users, but only 1% of those actually post.
Yeah.
So should people be using LinkedIn as almost like a networking tool, or should they be content creators on LinkedIn and sharing their career journeys, or perhaps even their business journeys, or even like people are like posting about their school and like their work experience and stuff. I know you post on LinkedIn, but should more people try to post on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to individuals that I'm working with, when you're looking for a job, 50% of that is applying to jobs, but the other 50% should be networking and putting yourself out there, whether that be using the likes of LinkedIn, whether that be showing up at networking events in person related to your industry. You cannot just rely on applying for jobs because yes, great CVs help and great cover letters help, but there's nothing better than getting into a company from like an industry connection that you've met in person or met via LinkedIn. So definitely. And also, like you said, the organic reach on LinkedIn is just like, is crazy. Like I posted, I mean, I have like 7,000 followers on LinkedIn.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's quite good, but I started off the year with like 3,000. So I've just been posting consistently. I've doubled that. And most of my posts get like 20,000 impressions, which obviously, if we compare that to the likes of Instagram or the likes of TikTok, that isn't going to happen consistently. That's every one-off post. So organic reach is great. And the reality is, when you apply for a job or when you get called to an interview, an employer is going to look you up on LinkedIn, right? So if you don't have a presence, it probably looks a little bit weird. If you don't have a profile in 2023, that looks a little bit strange. Whereas if you do have a profile, they can see that you're active. They can see that you're consistently sharing content. You know, that's going to show them that, number one, you're really clued up and you're really passionate about your industry. But number two, you've got a great sense of initiative. So surely they're going to want to interview you. It's like a portfolio, essentially. So yes, definitely.
I love it. And so that leads really well into the question I had around CVs. Because you've got LinkedIn now, you've got this kind of networking tool / content creation platform that you can kind of create a personal brand around yourself. Is the CV still relevant? Like, if it is relevant, how do you write a good CV?
So I say it is still relevant. The job search market is definitely changing and evolving, more so for specific industries. So for example, the creative industry, or for the likes of the marketing industry, for example. There's been a switch, and now if you're applying for a creative role at an agency, you may want to create a creative CV, which isn't just the standard blanket Word format. It's something a little more. However, for the majority of industries, they are still quite traditional. So if you're applying for, the finance industry, the insurance industry, those kind of more traditional industries, yes, they do still value a CV, and it is important to have a good one. In terms of how do you write a CV, that's a really good question. And I mean, I have a lot of tips, but I think the first ones that come to my head are, number one, you want to ideally tailor your CV for every job that you're applying for. And I don't mean you need to rewrite a whole new CV. What I mean by that is you need to take a look at the job description and the kind of key skills and experience they're looking for, and you need to translate that into your CV and cover letter. Employers, number one, a lot of these jobs, they have hundreds of applicants, and employers don't always have time to look through hundreds of applications. So a lot of the time when you apply online, your application goes into a system, and then on the recruiter's back end, they'll be like, okay, I want to see the applicants. Can you bring me up all the applicants that have 2 years experience in marketing? And if you don't have that, specifically listed, or if you've not tailored your CV in the right way, you're not going to come up as a match. So I don't know if anyone listening has ever applied for a job and they get rejected within 5 minutes, and you're like, how can they have looked at my application already? Chances are your CV has been screened by the system they use, and it's not been a match, essentially.
It's not made the cut.
It's not made the cut. So definitely you want to tailor it. And second of all, like, employers can tell from a mile off that you've not tailored your CV, and it just makes you kind of look uninterested, and they want people that are sure for that role. So definitely you want to tailor your CV. The second thing I would focus on is you want to focus on results and impact over responsibilities. A lot of the time people tend to list their job responsibilities on their CV, but the reality is employers don't care what your responsibilities were in a job, because in every job there's responsibilities. And if there's 2 people applying for the same job, if your CVs only list your responsibility, they're going to look identical. So how can you differentiate yourself? Well, employers care about what you did with those responsibilities and the impact you were able to have, essentially, and results you were able to achieve.
Let's make it real. So let's give an example of a responsibility and then a result. Like, do any examples come to mind for you?
Yes. So for example, in a retail role, if you maybe working in a retail job and you maybe have listed on your CV that you serve customers at the tills, right? How can we turn that into a result? Well, first of all, you want to think, how many customers do I serve per week? So ideally on your CV, if the bullet points can be kind of weekly or monthly, that's ideal. So let's focus on weekly. So say on an average day, you serve 20 customers and you work 5 days a week. So that's going to be 20 times 5, and my maths is awful, but I believe that's 100, right? So that's going to be 100 customers. Okay, so then result. How can you think of, ultimately businesses care about people that are going to make them money, save them money, save them time or help others. So we can think, how can we tie that to a revenue goal? So you think, okay, I serve these 100 customers a week, and on average, what is the average sale that I'm dealing with? So say if it was £5, right, minimum. So you would then do 100 times 5, which is 500. And you would then transition your bullet point from serve customers at tills to, communicate with 100 plus customers a week, generating over £500 of sales.
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So let's assume you've written up the CV. So you've built your personal brand on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. You've written up the CV. Mm-hmm. You've submitted it. It's been accepted. Actually, quick one. Cover letters. What's your take on cover letters?
I mean, yes, they are very annoying, but they are necessary still for a lot of organizations.
Can I give you a cover letter confession?
Go on.
I haven't written a cover letter for a while, but I have helped write some. Mm-hmm. And I have I can't believe I'm about to say this, I have basically dumped the CV content into ChatGPT and said, write me a cover letter summarizing this CV in this many paragraphs. And it's really good. It's more good than I'm willing to admit. Do you co-sign that? Or do you think people should be? Do
you know what? I think I'm all for making people's lives easier.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. However, from my experience and what I've seen with ChatGPT, unless you put a lot of effort into giving it information into what you want it to create, it comes out as something that's very generic and something that's very obviously written by AI. And employers are not stupid. In fact, I'm a member of the Institute of Student Employers. So I am part of discussions with employers, and obviously one of the main discussions they are having is about students and graduates using AI as part of their application process. So they are thinking, okay, how can we deal with this? How can we equip this? So employers are very much aware that people are using this. So if you are going to use AI, I would definitely do some reading on how you can actually, give the cover letter your tone of voice, because you can tell ChatGPT to use your tone of voice. You can share previous cover letters you've maybe written so that it kind of aligns with those. But yeah, just don't do it, copy and paste whatever it comes up with, because it's so obvious it's written by an AI.
Yeah, you use it, but then tailor it and edit it. And then any employer that's worth their salt is going to have a video interview component to the application process anyway. Cool. So CVs handed in, cover letters handed in. Let's assume that we're successful. Email comes in. We'd like to call you in to interview.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for an interview?
Oh. Okay, good question. So let me think how I should answer this. So I think the most important thing, for an interview is you definitely want to do in-depth research on the company. And what I mean by that is I don't just mean going onto their company website and reading the about page. You need to know that company inside and out. So whether that be, going on to YouTube and typing in the company name and executive and watching exec keynotes, or whether that be checking out if they have a podcast, or even going onto the company's LinkedIn page and seeing what they're sharing about. Because a lot of the time, the content on their LinkedIn page is going to be slightly different to their other social channels. And they share content which is more around what it's actually like to work there and what the culture's like and things like that. And again, can you take it one step further? Can you see what their employees are posting about? Because all of these things, if you can drop these nuggets of information into the interview, they are going to make you stand out. Just because the average person, they don't bother. They will their research will be the company website. And the last thing you want to do is go into that interview and be asked the question, what do you know about the company? And give the exact same 3 boring facts as the person before you and the person after you, because you're not going to stand out.
Yeah.
Research helps you stand out. So I think definitely research. The second thing is use the job description as your guide, right? So this is the same for when you are creating your CV, when you're creating your cover letter. All the information that you need is in that job description, specifically at the end where it says what we're looking for or the skills we're looking for. Those are the criteria that you can be graded on in your interview. In fact, a lot of the time you can tell which questions they're going to ask you based on those, right? So if they're saying they want someone with communication skills, You need to have prepared examples of when you've used your communication skills and how you've generated results. And again, if you can prepare your answer so that they include numbers and results like we spoke about previously, then that's going to make you stand out as well. So research, studying the job description and making sure you have kind of solid examples of the skills they're looking for. And then finally, I think having some really good questions to ask at the end of an interview. A lot of people massively underestimate the value of asking good questions at the end of an interview. But the reality is this is your last chance to make an impression on the employer, right? So if you come up with some really well thought out questions that they're like, oh, I've never heard someone ask that before, or really makes them think, you're going to stand out. So whenever I'm working with clients, I always tell them, and this may sound like overkill, but hear me out. I always say, try and prepare about 6 or 7 questions to ask at the end of the interview. You likely will not ask all these questions. However, usually a lot of time throughout the interview, 2 or 3 of your questions get answered, right? Just through general conversation. So if you only have 3 questions, 2 of them have already been answered. You don't want to come to the end and they're like, I've just got 1 right. So prepare 6 or 7. And the categories I recommend are research-based questions. So that's the first category. So these are questions that allow you to show the employer that you've done research, but you're asking for further clarification on. For example, I read on your company page that you recently invested £2 million in a sustainability initiative. Is this something you're involved with? Would you be able to tell me more about it? Because it's shown that you've done the research, but you're also interested. So research-based questions are really good. The second one are kind of role-based questions. So these aren't just generic questions like, can you tell me about a day in your life? This is where you've actually looked at the job description, looked at the responsibilities, and you've picked something out that interests you that you'd like more information on. For example, in the job description, you said that this role involves creating email marketing campaigns. I have experience using MailChimp. What platform do you use? And then the final third category is research-based question. Sorry, the final category is interviewer-based questions. So these are questions that allows the interviewer to share their perspective on a particular topic. Because in reality, who doesn't like talking about themselves? So you want to prepare questions that, I feel like I'm repeating myself. Anyway, cut that out. These are questions that allow the interviewer to share their perspective. For example, I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you've been able to progress from a marketing assistant to a marketing manager in only 3 years, which is amazing. Can you tell me about what that journey has been like? Or I noticed you recently attended this event. That looked really interesting to me. Can you tell me more about that? And these type of questions really actually allow you to build a relationship with the interviewer. And again, are going to make you stand out because most people, they just come up with the same boring interview questions like, can you tell me a typical day in the life, etc. Sorry, that was a very, very long-winded answer.
Shoshanna, yeah. I'm in a business phase of my life at the moment, but let me tell you, I am hooked on your every word. I don't know when I'm going to have to apply for another job again, but I'm going to be listening back to this podcast episode because the stuff you're saying, as I said, is so useful to me now. I wish I'd known it when I was younger. I've been in job interviews and frozen up. I've messed up, been nervous, just not really known what to do. I've been the person who hasn't had any questions at the end. I'll even confess that part of the reason why I am running a business at the moment is because I've historically not been so good on the corporate front. I think I've learned a lot as I've gotten older, but yeah, the stuff you're sharing is so great. Just to build upon what you said, I think on the research front, if you can look at the LinkedIn page or any of their other socials, because a lot of companies are active on Instagram and TikTok at the moment, see what they've been doing, ask some questions about that. But I would also add to that, go on Eventbrite and see if they do any events. Because imagine if you've been to an event, you've already met the person who's interviewing or someone on their team already, that's going to help you to stand out. And then something that I've always done after I've done an interview is I've tried to find the email address of the person who's interviewed me or an inbox I think that they'll have access to. And I'll send them an email saying, I'd like to say a big thank you for taking the time to interview me today. And I look forward to speaking with you again. If you have any follow-up questions, please send them to me. And every company I've sent that to, both the companies I've sent that to have taken me on to the next stage of interview. Because again, it's you're seeing hundreds of people.
Most people don't do that.
And then it's if you just do these nice things, then you stand out to them. Really, really good. So let's assume the interview is successful and then you get a job offer. Actually, rewind very, very quickly. in interviews, sometimes they ask you, what are your pay expectations?
Yeah.
How do you answer that question? I've never understood how to answer that question.
Yeah. So, there's a couple different ways that you can answer it. However, I would recommend ideally, I'd like to think that you are not at the interview stage if you're not already kind of aware how much the role is paying and that it aligns with your expectations, if that makes sense. So I know this scenario is them asking you. However, a lot of the time, there's been situations with clients where they've got to final interview stages, they've been made offers only to find that the offer is so lowball that it doesn't even match what they're looking for, right? So ideally, you want to know the salary range that the employer is hiring for before you even waste your time or before you even invest time preparing for an interview. Because that happens, right? Employers don't always list a salary and you don't know what it is. You spend all this time preparing for you to then maybe get to the end and find out, you're both not aligned. That's a real waste of time. So definitely encourage anyone, if you are invited to an interview and the salary range has not been stated on the job description, it's well within your right to ask. Obviously, some employers get a bit funny about that, but realistically, that's not somewhere you'd want to work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Can they not just be open with, this is the budget we have for this role? Because realistically, they do know it. The only reason they're not sharing that information with you is for their benefit, right? Yeah. Essentially. So that's my first point. Second point would be, I would try and put off mentioning money ideally for as long as possible, especially in this stage, just because obviously sometimes they'll ask you this on a screening phone call, or sometimes you'll be asked this at a first stage interview and you'll give a number. However, once you've done 3-4 interviews and you've learnt more about the role, you might think, oh, do you know what? Actually, this role is more than I thought I was. I wish I asked for that. So ideally, if you're asked early on in the process, I would usually say, I'd like to learn some more information about the role before I can answer that, essentially. And again, if it's a decent employer, they shouldn't have an issue with that. If it's not a decent employer, then, potential red flag. Or obviously, if then you do say that and they're like, no, if they're, pushing back on that, ideally you want to go into the interview with a range in mind. So for example, what I mean by a range is a range of between 40 to 50K. So that's not giving specific numbers. It allows room for negotiation. If you were offered the job later down the line, you've not given them anything specific, you've just given them a range. So yeah, if you can put salary talk off, if you're asked, that's good. But if you can't, I would definitely be prepared with a range. And in fact, start your job search with a range in mind, because realistically you will be asked this question, and a lot of the time people panic and they're like, oh, I haven't thought about it, or oh, I've got an interview tomorrow, what if I'm asked it? But realistically, if you start your job search off with a range or a number in mind, you're only going to apply for jobs that match that number, and it's going to save you a lot of potentially wasted time.
Absolutely. Different companies, different industries pay different amounts. And then again, to build upon what you said, take the upper and lower bounds of that range and then pop it into a salary calculator, an income tax calculator, and income tax calculators will ask you for the gross salary. They'll also ask, when you went to uni, if you have a student loan, what your pension contributions are, and you can translate that into what your take-home pay is likely to be on a monthly or annual basis. So at the end of the day, you've got bills to pay. And whilst you would want to potentially work for every employer in the world, there are just going to be some that you're not going to be able to afford to work for, potentially. Yeah. Great stuff.
And always negotiate. There's always room for negotiation.
Absolutely.
And employers expect you to negotiate. So if you are accepting the first offer, you're definitely leaving money on the table.
Nothing to add. So you've done the interview is successful. Now, because this is real life, let's assume that you've been applying for multiple jobs at the same time. How do you deal with competing offers? You've got 2 yeses. How do you decide what to say yes to? How do you let the other people down professionally?
Good question. So I think definitely I've been in this situation before as well. So the first thing I would recommend is, writing a list of pros and cons for both of the roles, just so you can weigh that up. And also, I think it depends on you as an individual, right? We all need money to live. However, some of us value money more than others. However, some of us value doing something we're really passionate about or being really happy at work more than others. So obviously it depends on your specific situation, right? Because if you're somebody that is very money motivated, then you'd probably just go with the higher offer, right? But the higher offer doesn't necessarily mean, you know, the workplace that you're going to be happiest at, the workplace you're going to be most fulfilled at. Should
you go for the job you love or the job that pays?
I mean, ideally both. Both. If you can get to a place where, and I do believe that is possible, can I say, I do believe that you can find a job that you enjoy that does pay well, 100%. And if you're not at that stage now, you will be at some point. So please hang in there. But like I said, it just depends on you, like you as an individual. For example, when I was working in full time, I quite often interviewed around just because I wanted to keep my interview skills good and practice, and also just to see what I could get. And at one point I was offered a job by Google, which was pretty much double my salary. However, it also involved relocating to Dublin, and I just moved back to London, and I just moved back to be near my boyfriend. So at that time in my life, it didn't make sense for me to move to Dublin just for double the salary. And you know what? I'm so glad I didn't, because a few months later, COVID happened and I would have been stuck in Dublin in lockdown, not knowing anyone, right? So it really just depends what your situation is. But I think ideally, a good mix of both is great. And I know that's like easier said than done.
Yeah. Also, a thing to be wary of with pay is the pay, because a lot of people will sign waivers saying that they'll work over the, 48 hours a week in their contracts. And so you may be offered a job role that pays you double your current salary. Mm-hmm. But if you're working double the time, then you're actually being paid the same amount in terms of your hourly rate. So your hourly rate is a far greater indicator of how much you're actually being paid for your time, rather than simply just the gross salary.
That's a really good point.
Now, thinking about like working in the job, you know, we're in a era of rising prices. We need not go any further than the supermarket, look at our bills to see just how expensive everything is right now. And yes, there's a big culture around setting up a side hustle, starting a business. Like you've done that, I've done that. But for the vast majority of people, for the 30 million or so taxpayers in this country, it's like you're going to increase your income by getting a pay rise, right? So what tips do you have for people who've been working in a job and have an eye on career progression, promotion, and getting paid more?
Yeah, so absolutely. So obviously I do have tips, which I'll share in a second. However, in this day and age, realistically, the quickest way to increase your salary is by moving companies and getting a new job, essentially. Because companies will pay more for new individuals to bring new individuals inside of the organization from outside. Whereas in reality, the kind of average pay rise in a normal corporate company can literally be anything from about 3 to 10%. And 10% is a good pay rise, right? And it's very rare. Maybe you'll get 15, maybe you'll get 20, but that is very rare. In fact, I know clients that have been offered 2 and 3% pay rises, whereas if you actually take into account the cost of living and look at that without tax, it's literally like £100 or £200 a month, which in the grand scheme of things is no difference whatsoever, taking into account things like inflation. So if your goal right now is to increase your salary by a vast amount, it's probably quite unlikely it's going to happen at your current company, just to be 100% honest, unless, I don't know, something amazing happens or you land an amazing promotion and you're promoted 10 grades higher. It's just not likely to happen. However, if you are someone that is, you know, enjoying your company and likes the company, is enjoying the development opportunities, which I enjoyed. I was at my company for 5 years. I could have earned more elsewhere. I could have had higher job offers. However, for me, the progression was there and I was continuously being challenged and I had an existing network. And so for me, at that point, the kind of progression in terms of responsibility and excitement was more than maybe earning loads more. Don't get me wrong. I got pay rises and I got promotions annually, but I could have got more elsewhere. Anyway, back to how to actually go about getting a pay rise in your existing job. So a couple tips. So my first tip is, you know, get super, super clear on what is expected of you. a lot of the time, people will have been in their jobs for 6 to 12 months and they'll want a pay rise. But when you actually look at the work that they've done, they've basically just delivered on the basic requirements that are expected of them in their role. And that's what's expected of you. So that doesn't really necessarily warrant a pay rise, in my opinion. So you want to get super clear of what is expected of you. So if you have not had a conversation with your manager already, you need to understand, what do they, you need to get them to set some goals for you, basically. What do they expect you to achieve in the next quarter, in the next 6 months, and how will your success be measured against those things? Once you understand that, you can then start delivering work that meets those and exceeds those, because otherwise you just run the risk of doing lots of busy work. And if you come to your manager with a list of things that you think warrant you promotion, but they aren't actually aligned to the goals they've set for you, you've just wasted your time, right? So get super clear on what's expected of you so that you can start delivering and over-delivering on those expectations. Once you've begun delivering on those expectations and you've kind of got the day job sorted, you can then start putting yourself out there for opportunities that allow you to exceed those goals, essentially. So you do that and proactively look for different opportunities, whether that be volunteering yourself for new projects, asking to shadow different teams, asking to lead team projects, etc. You know what I mean? Anything that's going to help you exceed those goals. Once you've exceeded those goals, a really crucial step, which a lot of people actually forget, which is very important in the working world, is self-promotion. So a lot of the time at work, you could be doing the best work in the world, but if nobody knows about it, you're not going to get promoted. A lot of the time, your manager may not even know about the work you're doing if you don't see them regularly, if you don't work in an office. So you definitely want to make sure that your work and the work that you're doing is getting visibility to not only your team, your manager, but the wider organization. How can you do that? Through things like sending monthly or quarterly status email updates to your team or wider team to let them know, this is what I've done, this is who's helped me. You can volunteer to present at staff meetings to share kind of the work you've done. You can proactively schedule meetings with kind of senior members of staff to share the work that you've done and get their feedback. There's kind of all these different things that allow you to, self-promote. And if it does feel a bit cringe in the beginning, like I'm not going to lie, but corporate is a game essentially. So self-promotion, because you need advocates that are going to help, back up your boss when they're asking, how's it been like working with this person? Do they deserve a promotion? It's definitely that. And then, of course, finally, ask. A lot of the time, people expect a promotion or they think their manager knows that they want a promotion. Well, your manager isn't psychic, right? So a lot of the time, you just have to make the ask and bring all of the evidence you have from, exceeding those expectations, from asserting yourself into new things, through the self-promotion and kind of testimonials you've got from other people. All of those things then build a case for that promotion. Another thing I want to add is a lot of people will kind of leave the ask or mentioning that they want one till the very end of year review. And that's okay. However, what's even better is actually starting your year off, letting your manager know, do you know what? I'd really like to get promoted this year. What are the kind of proactive steps or things you'd like me to achieve to get there that we can work on together in the next 6 to 12 months? So that from the very beginning of the year, that's in their head. They know that's your goal and you can check in with them every 2 to 3 months to make sure you're kind of still performing to those tasks and make sure it actually happens. Because a lot of the time it's very political. Budgets will need to be requested months in advance before things like promotions actually happen. So the sooner you can kind of plant that seed, the better as well.
Yeah. Again, such a good answer. And it's like, you do all of these things, but then be prepared to, if you want to really increase your pay, to move jobs and not do it in the kind of like, if you don't give me a pay rise, then I'll leave kind of way. But just know that these are all of the options that you have. Like you can either, as you say, request, like have the conversation early on, get buy-in from your manager, have that roadmap, have that plan. But just know that at the end of the day, if the pay rise doesn't come, that you can always leave and get the pay rise you deserve elsewhere.
Absolutely. And also like, it's kind of vice versa. Like, a promotion doesn't necessarily always guarantee a pay rise, and a pay rise doesn't always necessarily guarantee a promotion. So know what your ask is as well. Are you asking for promotion? Are you asking for a pay rise? Or are you asking for both, essentially, which is fine.
Here is a question that I have, which again is like not something that you're necessarily taught in school or at all, really. A lot of people are probably freestyling this one, which is when time comes to leave a job, how do you leave professionally and how do you leave well?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And I think a lot of the time it's hard, especially if you like know you're leaving or you can kind of sometimes switch off. But I'm very much, a big advocate for not burning bridges because you never know when you may need that relationship or that potential door open in the future. So like you said, it's definitely important to leave professionally. I think a really kind of solid handover. So usually if you are leaving, your company will make an effort to hire a replacement, and ideally they will kind of schedule it so that there's maybe some overlap between the two of you so you can really hand over the work that you've done. I think actually putting in effort to properly hand that over and make everyone in the company's life a lot easier says a lot about you as a person. Obviously, there's unique situations where you've maybe been treated like crap and you don't feel like doing a good handover. And you know what? That's up to you to make that decision.
Yeah, but I still think you should leave well because, look, in my time running Mr MoneyJar, I'm posting stuff on LinkedIn now. I'm doing projects with people that used to be my colleagues.
Yeah.
Like the people that are commenting on my LinkedIn posts, the people that are following me, sharing, resharing are people that I maybe had just one interaction with and I was professional with them. I was nice to them and they remember that for literally like 10 years. So, and don't get me wrong, like I've burnt not loads and loads of bridges, but like I haven't always been perfect. But the more relationships that you can keep intact, the better, I think, when it comes to the working world.
100%.
So Shoshanna, what I'm also interested to know from you is, will AI replace jobs?
Yeah, so my honest answer is yes, I do think AI will replace jobs. However, I think it's going to create a whole load more jobs in different industries and in different areas. Just that's my honest opinion. Aside from that, I do think that the world that we're living in now with like the evolution of technology, you cannot just sit there and kind of be complacent with the role and industry you're in. We all need to kind of be upskilling. So for example, yes, some jobs are already disappearing because of AI. However, lots more are being created. So how can you make yourself, employable for those jobs, upskilling? And I do believe that all of us in the kind of next 10 to 15 years, we are potentially all going to have to upskill, 4 to 5 times, maybe continuously every 10 years, just because that's the way the evolution of technology is going. So yes, in summary, it will eliminate some jobs, but I also think it's going to create more jobs, a lot more technical jobs. As someone has to program the AI, someone has to develop the algorithms. There'll be additional jobs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and someone needs to get the most out of the AI tools as well. Like I was a bit resistant to AI in the beginning, but my youngest brother, he uses ChatGPT the way that I used to use Google when I was his age. And I was like, okay, this is where we're at now. ChatGPT, Bard, Bing Chat, these are all free resources available online. I need to be seeing if I can use them to make my workday a bit better. So I now say to people, look, have a play, see what the use case is. If you're not using AI in your day-to-day, unless you do like a completely manual job, for example, maybe there's even applications there, you're probably working too hard and there are no medals for like working harder than you have to, I think.
Exactly. And you know what? It is scary, but I also think one of the reasons it's so scary is because in today's society, our worth is basically 100%. Society tells you that your worth is 100% based on what you do and how much money you earn. And obviously that's tied to a job. However, what if AI did take over and nobody had jobs and we were all given, the government gave everyone, a specific amount of money to live and we all actually have more time to do the things that we actually really care about? That would be a complete transition in society and it would be very interesting. So it's only scary based on how our society currently is in terms of how we determine worth. However, that could easily change and maybe it would create a better society, a more fulfilling one. We don't actually know. So, yeah.
Shoshanna, this has been such a wicked conversation. I've loved every minute of it. Just to wrap up, I'm going to ask you the question we ask everyone, which is, what is the best piece of money advice you've ever received? Who shared it with you? and what did you learn? And feel free to take your time with it.
Oh, that's not a piece of advice. It's just like general.
Go for it.
This is going to be I feel like this is a very underwhelming answer. But I think it's not a piece of advice. No, actually, do you know what? Always negotiate. That is my one piece of advice. Always negotiate. That is the best piece of advice I've been given, and that will be the best piece of advice I continue to give people. Because if you're not negotiating, you are leaving money on the table.
Love it. For the people who want to find you online and maybe off, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on pretty much all platforms as the Fairy Job Mother. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, and that's my name. So it's Shoshanna Davis, and I post content there as well.
Shoshanna, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for watching this week's episode of the Mr MoneyJar Show. If you enjoyed it, then please do subscribe, as it helps out the show a lot and enables us to continue running. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another special guest. I've been your host, Timmy Merriman Johnson.